I never expected that something as small and silent as a folded letter could change everything. It was just lying there on my pillow. No warning, no clue. My son had written it, but what he confessed inside shattered every layer of who I thought I was and who he had become. This isn't just a story. It's a moment that forever divided the before from the after. Before we start, tell me, from which city are you watching this? Right now, let's see how far this story reaches. I had just come out of the shower when I saw it. A simple white envelope. My name written in Daniel's handwriting. That loopy boyish script he never quite outgrew. For a moment I thought it was something silly. Maybe a thank you or some reminder he didn't want to forget. But something about the way it was placed so carefully, so quietly, made my chest tighten. I picked it up, towel still around my shoulders, and just stared at it. The room was dim, evening light bleeding through the thin curtains. The scent of lavender from the bath clung to the air, mixing with something else. Nostalgia maybe, or dread. I don't know. Daniel had been different lately, not in a loud or dramatic way, but in small, almost invisible turns. He lingered longer in the kitchen with me, made excuses to sit beside me during TV shows, asked questions about my day that seemed to come from a deeper place than habit, and I noticed, but I didn't want to say it aloud because naming things gives them power. My hands trembled as I opened the letter. The first line already made my throat catch. Mom, I need you to read this when you're alone. There are things I've felt for a long time. Thoughts I didn't understand at first. Feelings I thought I had to hide, not just from you but from myself. But I can't pretend anymore. And you deserve to know, even if it changes everything between us. I stopped there, my vision blurred. What was he saying? I sat down on the edge of my bed, letter in hand, heart galloping. The soft ticking of the clock on the wall felt loud in the stillness. I could hear the muffled clinks of dishes downstairs. He must have still been in the kitchen finishing dinner. The house was too quiet for what was written on that page. I kept reading. I know you've always seen me as your boy, and I'll always be your son. But lately I've seen you differently, not just as mom, but as a woman, a strong, beautiful, warm woman who's been alone too long. I know it's not supposed to happen this way. I've tried to fight it. But the truth is, I love you not just with the heart as son, but as someone who sees your soul, your pain, your quiet laughter, your loneliness, and I can't pretend that I don't notice how you look at me sometimes, too. I dropped the letter into my lap, suddenly cold. My breath was shallow. I stared at the ceiling, heart hammering. Was this a joke? A test? No, I knew my son, and I knew this was real. He had seen something in me. Something I tried to bury under the routine of motherhood and age. Something I hadn't felt in decades. I remembered the nights I sat up late alone, pretending the TV was company. The birthdays that came and went without a kiss. The way I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. But I had never imagined that Daniel, my Daniel, would see through all that. The letter continued. I'm not asking you for anything. I just wanted to say this out loud, even if only on paper, because I need you to know how much you matter. Not just because you raised me. Not because you kept us both afloat after Dad left, but because you're Sophia. And you deserve to be seen. Really seen by someone who loves every piece of you. I wiped my eyes when I started crying. I folded the letter, my fingers brushing over the crease like it might give me answers. It didn't. It only gave me more questions about what this meant, what I should do, how I felt. Was I angry? No. Confused? Yes. Touched in ways I didn't have words for. There was no roadmap for this. No book that said what to do when someone you love says something that breaks every rule, but does it with a heart full of honesty. I went downstairs. The kitchen light glowed softly. Daniel stood at the sink, Isla rolled up, scrubbing a dish. Just a normal evening. He turned when he heard me. Our eyes met. For a split second, something passed between us. Something unspoken but understood. He knew I'd read it. He didn't ask and I didn't speak. Instead, I walked to the table, sat down, and let the silence hold us. Because some moments aren't about answers. They're about allowing the question to exist. The days that followed passed like I was drifting through fog. I kept moving, washing dishes, folding laundry, taking my daily walks, but inside everything felt unsettled. The letter hadn't left my nightstand. I couldn't bring myself to put it away, and yet I couldn't look at it again either. It sat there, a quiet weight, reminding me that something between Daniel and me had changed forever. But nothing on the surface did. He was still the same. helping with groceries, asking if I wanted tea in the evenings, chuckling at my old sitcoms like he always had. But there was a stillness between us now, a cautiousness, a sense that each word was measured, each glance filtered. One night I was standing in the backyard, hands tucked into my cardigan pockets, watching the sky melt into a soft orange. The sunset was beautiful, but I wasn't really seeing it. I heard the back door open behind me, and then his voice. "You okay out here, Mom?" That word, Mom, it didn't hit the same anymore. Not because I didn't want to be his mother. I did. I was. But now I knew there was another layer to how he saw me. And suddenly everything was more complicated. I didn't turn to look at him. I just nodded. Just needed some air. He stepped up beside me. Quiet. We stood shoulder to shoulder. The sky darkened around us. The air was cool and smelled like cut grass. "Didn't mean to upset you," he said finally. I sighed. "You didn't upset me." He looked down, hands in his hoodie pockets. I just couldn't carry it anymore. Keeping it in. I know how it sounds. I do, but I also know it's real. I turned to face him. "Daniel, you're my son. That's all is going to matter." I know. But the things he said, he met my eyes, not defiant, just open, vulnerable. "I don't expect anything from you. I swear. I just needed you to know." There was a long silence. A strange ache settled in my chest. Not fear, not even shame. Something more like recognition. "I don't think I'd even know how to feel," I said softly. "You took me by surprise." "I know. I'm sorry for how it landed." "No," I shook my head. "Don't apologize for honesty. That letter, it was beautiful and confusing and more thoughtful than anything anyone's given me in years." His face softened. "You've been alone a long time." I didn't respond right away because he wasn't wrong. And it wasn't just being alone in the house. It was being alone in my own skin, in my thoughts, in my aging body that no one had looked at with affection or desire in over a decade. "I've forgotten what it feels like to be seen," I said quietly. He exhaled. "But I see you." The wind rustled the trees around us. Somewhere, a neighbor's dog barked in the distance. I suddenly felt exposed, not because he saw me, but because I realized how much I wanted to be seen, and how long I'd gone without it. We went back inside without saying more. The silence wasn't cold, just full. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the fan whirring above me. My mind replayed his words, his expression, the way his voice cracked ever so slightly when he spoke to me. This wasn't about a son losing control or crossing lines recklessly. It was something deeper. Came from love, and yes, maybe from loneliness too, both his and mine. Around midnight, I got out of bed and walked to the living room. He was there, curled on the couch with a book in his lap. He looked up, surprised. "You're still up." "I couldn't sleep," I said. He scooted over and patted the seat next to him. I sat, not touching, not too close. We just sat there like that for a while. Then he whispered, "You don't have to be alone anymore." I looked at him. Really looked at him. My son, a grown man, gentle, caring, maybe confused, but sincere, so deeply sincere. I placed my hand gently over his just for a moment. "Neither do you," I whispered back. Nothing more happened that night. Just that moment, that connection, that shared silence that wasn't empty. It was full of things neither of us could yet say. But something had shifted again. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the conversation. It was only the beginning. The next few days felt like walking a narrow bridge in the fog. Every step between Daniel and me felt cautious, like we were both trying to figure out where this was going, or if it should go anywhere at all. But we never brought up the letter again. Not directly. Instead, everything started feeling different. The way he lingered in the kitchen while I stirred soup, or how his fingers brushed mine just a moment longer when he passed me a mug of coffee. Little things, soft things, but noticeable. I wasn't naive. I'd lived too many years to mistake infatuation for affection or loneliness for love. But what Daniel was offering me didn't feel like either of those. It felt real, honest, and terrifying. One evening, I was folding laundry on the couch. My hands moved automatically, muscle memory from years of doing it without thinking. The house was quiet, the kind of calm that feels like it's waiting for something. He sat down beside me and picked up one of his own shirts, folding it slowly. "You know I meant every word in that letter," he said softly, his voice barely above the hum of the refrigerator. I looked at him. "I know you did." And you haven't told me to stop. You haven't told me I'm wrong. I hesitated, not because I didn't know what to say, but because what I wanted to say scared me. I don't think you are wrong, I said finally. I think you're braver than I've ever been. That surprised him. Me? Brave? Yes, because I've spent my whole life following the rules, doing what was expected, putting everyone else first, and now here you are looking at me not just as a mother but as a person, a woman. He reached over, gently brushing a strand of hair from my face. His touch was light, respectful but charged with meaning. I see you, Sophia. Hearing my name like that, not Mom, not Ma, but Sophia, made something in me shift. It was like he cracked a window I didn't even know was sealed shut. I felt a warmth rise through me, one I hadn't felt in decades. Not since before my marriage ended. Not since I started waking up alone every day, forgetting what it felt like to be wanted. I leaned back into the couch, unsure of what I was supposed to feel or do. There was no map for this, no safe guide. But his eyes held no expectations, just presence. You deserve to be happy, he said. So do you. He nodded, then looked down at his hands. I think I've always been looking for something that felt like home. And I never realized it was you. Not the version of you that raised me, but the woman I talk to now. Laugh with, share quiet with. You don't feel lost in this? I asked. I've never felt more certain. I couldn't stop the tears that gathered in my eyes. It wasn't sorrow. It was release. A letting go of the years I spent burying my needs, my desires, my identity as anything beyond being someone's mother. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how society draws thick lines around roles, about how age, motherhood, expectations, they all create cages we rarely even question. But here was Daniel handing me the key, not to step out but to choose, and I was starting to want that choice. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, I got up and went downstairs. He was on the porch reading. The lamp beside him lit his face in a warm glow. You couldn't sleep either? He asked. I shook my head. Too many thoughts. He set the book aside. I stepped closer, sat beside him. I've been thinking, I said, staring out into the quiet night, about what's right and what's real. And sometimes I don't think they're the same. Daniel was silent, waiting. I don't know what's ahead, I continued. But I know I don't want to shut the door on something, just because it doesn't fit someone else's definition of normal. He turned to me, his expression tender. So what does that mean? It means maybe we give this space a chance to breathe, a chance to become whatever it's supposed to be. His fingers brushed mine, then curled around them, holding gently. And just like that, something settled. Not finished, not defined, but no longer buried. That night we didn't need words. Just the quiet rhythm of the porch swing, the summer air, and the feeling of two people discovering each other. Not by accident, but by choice. The days that followed felt unlike anything I'd lived through before. Not because they were dramatic or filled with any sweeping declarations, but because everything suddenly had depth. The smallest glances, the softest gestures, they carried weight. The kind of quiet weight you don't recognize when you're younger. The kind that only comes when you've lived long enough to know what it means to be lonely and then to not be. Daniel and I settled into a kind of rhythm. Still mother and son in the world's eyes, we didn't change that. We went to the grocery store like always. We coped side by side. We laughed at the same reruns and bickered about which brand of coffee tasted better. But underneath all of that, something was growing. A closeness that no longer needed explanation or apology. One morning, I was in the garden pulling weeds and wiping sweat from my brow. When I felt him behind me, I turned and smiled. You missed the last dandelion, he said, pointing. Oh no, tragedy. I replied with mock panic, then reached down to pluck it. He took it from me before I could toss it aside. Then, without a word, he tucked it behind my ear. His eyes locked with mine. You're more beautiful now than I've ever seen you, he whispered. I didn't laugh it off this time. I didn't look away. Because I believed him. I stood there, dirt on my palms, knees sore, hair wind blown, and I felt more desirable, more alive than I had in years. That night, I sat with his letter again. Not to cry over it this time, but to read it with new eyes. It wasn't a confession anymore. It was a bridge from the person I used to be to the one I was becoming. I had spent so many years putting myself second, third, last. I'd been a wife, a mother, a caretaker. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that I was also a woman. A woman with needs, thoughts, longings, and Daniel, he hadn't reminded me. He'd seen it without me having to ask. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, We sat out on the porch again. He brought out 2 glasses of wine, handed me one, and sat close. "Do you think this will ever make sense to anyone else?" he asked. "Maybe not," I said. "But it doesn't have to." He looked out at the sky, the last streaks of color fading to twilight. "Sometimes I still feel like I'm crossing a line I shouldn't." I placed my hand on his. "There's a difference between harm and honesty," I said. "What we have isn't rooted in confusion. It's rooted in care. And care doesn't have to look the way other people expect it to." He exhaled slowly, then turned to face me fully. "I love you," he said. "Not just because you're my mother, but because you're you." Tears welled in my eyes, not from pain, but from the deep, slow ache of being understood. "And I love you," I replied. "Because in you I see the man who never judged me, who never looked away from who I really am." That night, for the first time, we didn't sleep in separate rooms. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. There were no fireworks, no reckless heat, just warmth. Hands exploring each other like familiar places rediscovered. Eyes open the whole time. Breaths shared in stillness. It wasn't about lust. It was about presence. A return to something I hadn't known I was missing. When morning came, the world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. The sun rose, the birds sang, and the kettle whistled on the stove as always. But I was different. We were different. And I no longer felt like I was waiting for something to begin. It already had. This, whatever name we give it, whatever shape it takes, was ours. And for once in my life, I wasn't afraid of being seen.